The insult at the Galactic Summit. The Galactic Summit was the biggest event in the galaxy. Leaders from over 200 alien species gathered in a giant space station floating near the star of Zunex Prime. The hall was full of strange lights, alien languages, and smells from across the stars. Every race had sent their best diplomats, warriors, and scholars, and among them stood one human, Jaxon Reid. He was tall for a human, with short black hair and deep brown eyes. He wore a simple black suit, not fancy, not shiny like the others, but he stood straight and proud. Earth was a new member of the Galactic Union, and Jaxon was their first official representative at this level. Some aliens respected humans for surviving their dangerous planet, but others still laughed at them. At the center of the hall, standing on a shining platform, was Valzari of the Zilari Dominion. She was tall, elegant, and powerful, her skin a smooth silver blue, and her long hair glowing softly like liquid stars. She was known across the galaxy for her sharp words and cold heart. She glanced at Jaxon and smirked. With a voice like music and ice, she spoke loudly so all could hear. And here we have the human, a species of, how do you say, primitive breeders, still using fire and iron like newborns. I'm surprised they walked into this hall without a leash. The room laughed. Some aliens chuckled nervously. Others laughed hard. Even the translators made the insult clear in every language. Jaxon didn't react. He stood there, calm. But inside, something burned. Not just shame, not just anger, something deeper. He remembered Earth's struggles to join this alliance, how they were tested again and again, how many times his people were called death world beasts or barely evolved apes. He had smiled through it all. He had spoken gently, always choosing peace. But this was too far. Valzari wasn't done. She stepped down from her platform and walked toward him, slow and graceful like a hunter. Her guards stood tall behind her, golden armor shining. She stopped just 2 feet from Jaxon and looked him up and down. Tell me, human, what can your species possibly offer us? Muscles, raw passion? Perhaps that's all your kind is good for. Another round of laughter filled the room. Jaxon finally spoke. His voice was low, calm, and steady. We offer something your kind may not understand, Ambassador Valzari. She raised an eyebrow. And what's that? He leaned forward slightly, eyes locked on hers. Surprise. She blinked once, confused, but Jaxon was already turning away, walking out of the hall with quiet confidence. No shouting, no anger. But his mind was already making a plan. Outside the summit, in the quiet metal corridors of the station, Jaxon took a deep breath. He touched the small pendant around his neck, a gift from his grandmother before he left Earth. She called me a breeder, he muttered. Let's see how her kind handles it. He wasn't a soldier. He wasn't a spy. He was a mechanic. But he had learned how to build things, how to take things apart. And if someone looked close enough, they'd see the same skill in the way he handled people. He smiled to himself, a slow, quiet smile. This wasn't going to be a war of weapons. No, that would be too easy. This would be something else. Something permanent. Back inside the summit, Valzari sat back on her seat, still wearing a smug smile, but for the first time, she felt something strange, a tiny chill at the base of her spine. The game begins. 3 weeks had passed since the Galactic Summit, but Jaxon Reid hadn't forgotten the insult. He played the moment again and again in his mind. Valzari's smirk, the laughter of the crowd, the word breeder cutting deeper than any weapon. He didn't shout back. He didn't fight her there. He waited, and when the perfect opportunity came, he grabbed it. The Zilari Dominion announced a cultural exchange mission to Earth. Valzari herself would lead the visit, showing the lesser worlds how diplomacy was truly done. The galaxy praised her grace and wisdom. Earth quietly requested that Jaxon Reid serve as her official escort during her visit. She agreed. Her personal log entry that day simply read, Let the primitive guide me. It will make the trip amusing. The Zalari ship landed just outside a quiet human city built along the edge of massive red canyons. Sunlight bounced off tall stone towers. The human officials kept their distance, unsure how to greet a woman who looked like she had walked out of a dream, but carried herself like a queen. Zari wore a shimmering black robe with moving, silver patterns across the fabric. Her long white hair floated gently behind her, defying gravity. Her bodyguards, huge feline-looking aliens in armor, stood close. But as she stepped out, Jaxon was already waiting for her. No suit this time. He wore a simple brown jacket, dusty boots, and a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Ambassador Zari," he said politely, bowing just enough to be proper, not submissive. She looked him over and gave a slow nod. "I see your species can dress themselves now. Impressive," Jaxon smiled. "We've evolved, Ambassador. Let me show you just how much." He didn't take her to Earth's shining cities or clean political halls. He took her to the wild. Their first stop was a floating solar farm over a desert. Wind screamed through the massive canyons, and the sun turned the rocks red and gold. Zari hated the heat, but Jaxon didn't let her complain. "This is where Earth survives, not where it shows off," he told her. She rolled her eyes, but followed. Later, they visited a village built under giant glowing mushrooms in a humid forest. There, humans lived beside bioengineered plants that could walk. Zari nearly fell into a swamp. Jaxon caught her wrist just in time. "You're light," he said, teasing. "I'm balanced," she snapped, pulling her arm away. But she didn't thank him either. Every day, Jaxon pushed her boundaries, physically, emotionally. He took her deep into human territory. No guards, no palace, no comfort. And slowly, something changed. She stopped mocking his words. She started listening. She didn't ask for translators anymore. She answered Jaxon directly. One night, they stayed in a shelter built into the side of a mountain. It had no tech, only firelight and blankets made from recycled plant fibers. Zari sat across from Jaxon, staring into the fire. For once she looked quiet, still. "Why did you bring me here?" she asked softly. "To see the real Earth," Jaxon replied. "And what is the real Earth, Jaxon Reid?" He looked at her, long and steady. "It's pain. And survival. And people who don't give up, no matter who laughs at them." Zari said nothing for a moment. Then she stood up and walked to the door of the shelter. The stars were bright outside, brighter than she had ever seen. "I thought I understood your species," she said. "But you confuse me." Jaxon stood beside her. "That's good. Confusion is the first step toward respect." She turned to him slowly. Their faces were close now. Too close. "Don't confuse this with weakness," she warned. "I don't," Jaxon whispered. There was a long silence between them. And then she walked away into the night air, her silver blue skin glowing under the starlight. Jaxon watched. Her go, his face unreadable, but inside he smiled. She didn't know it yet. But the game had already begun. The bond forms, the human wilderness was not kind. Sharp winds howled across the cliffs. The sky rumbled with distant thunder. Strange bird creatures cried out from the rocky ledges. Zari had never been this far from technology. No guards, no control. Just one tent, one human, and a storm rolling in fast. They had planned a simple day hike into the canyon. Jaxon told her it was safe. She had insisted on going without her guards. "I don't need protection from dirt and wind," she had said. Now, with heavy clouds overhead and freezing rain beginning to fall, Zari realized she had made a mistake. Her robe was soaked. Her hair clung to her face. Her boots slipped on the muddy trail. Jaxon walked ahead, steady, pulling a small hover sled loaded with emergency gear. When he noticed her struggling, he didn't mock her. He simply held out his hand. For a moment, she stared at it like it was a trap. Then she took it. His grip was firm. Warm. Human. They found shelter beneath a natural rock arch. Jaxon set up a heat lamp and rolled out 2 survival mats. He handed her a dry blanket and a protein bar. Valzari wrapped the blanket around herself and sat stiffly, her pride hurting more than her cold fingers. "I'm not weak," she muttered. "I never said you were," Jaxon replied, taking a bite of his bar. She didn't look at him. "Zilleri don't usually lower themselves to this level." "Well," he said, "humans don't usually get called primitive breeders by diplomats, either." Her eyes met his, sharp, challenging, but something behind them was softer now. The storm grew louder. Thunder cracked overhead. Rain turned to hail. Hours passed in silence. Eventually, Valzari moved closer to the heater, shivering. Her skin, usually glowing with a cool shimmer, now looked pale and dim. Jaxon stood up and unzipped his jacket. "You're freezing," he said. "Use this." She looked at the jacket like it was a dirty rag. He chuckled. "Don't worry, it's not made from animal skin." She snatched it from his hands anyway. Minutes later, she was wrapped in both blanket and jacket, her shoulders finally relaxing. Then, something strange happened. She spoke. Not with arrogance, not with sarcasm, but with truth. "I wasn't always like this," she said, staring at the heater's flickering light. "I was once soft, curious, until the courts made me hard." Jaxon listened without interrupting. "My mother died in scandal," she said. "My father sent me to learn strength, and I did. I rose higher than any female diplomat in our history." She paused. And then, "You." Jaxon raised an eyebrow. "Me? You didn't scream. You didn't fight. You walked away, quiet, calm, like you knew something I didn't." "I did," he said. "I knew I didn't need to raise my voice, I only needed time." She looked at him sharply again. But this time, it wasn't hate in her eyes. It was curiosity, maybe even fear. That night, the storm didn't let up. There was only one heater, only one mat thick enough to retain warmth. The rules of survival didn't care about politics. "I won't share a mat with a human," she said, eyes narrowing. "Then you'll freeze," Jaxon replied calmly. Minutes later, they lay back under the same blanket. No touching, no words, just breathing, slow, close. The silence between them wasn't awkward anymore. It was alive. Hours passed. The storm faded, and then, her voice barely a whisper. "Your body is too warm." He smiled into the darkness. "You're welcome." As dawn broke, Jaxon rose and stepped outside. The air was cold, but clear. Valzari followed him. They stood, together at the edge of the cliff, watching sunlight crawl across the canyon floor. Birds flew below them. Rivers glittered like silver snakes. For the first time, Valzari didn't feel superior to this planet. She felt small, but not in a bad way. "Your world is dangerous," she said, "but also beautiful." Jaxon looked at her. "So are you, Kerr." Turned to him sharply. He wasn't smiling to flatter her. He meant it. For once she had no reply, just silence, and a strange, unfamiliar flutter in her chest. The consequences, Valzari sat on the edge of her royal spa pool, surrounded by golden steam and alien blossoms. She was finally home. Her guards stood far away. No one dared disturb her, and yet she didn't feel calm. The palace walls of polished crystal felt too quiet. Her thoughts kept returning to Earth, to the wild storms, the firelight, his voice, to him. 2 weeks had passed since she left the human planet. She told herself it meant nothing, a small moment of weakness, a curiosity. But now, something was wrong. Her skin felt heavy. Her pulse raced randomly. She woke up in the night, sweating, confused, and there was a strange warm glow in her veins, one that doctors couldn't explain. The royal physician stood nearby, holding a shimmering scanner. "I ran your blood work 3 times, Lady Valzari," he said nervously. She raised a hand. "Get to the point." He bowed, trembling. "You are pregnant." For a long moment she didn't move, didn't breathe. Then slowly she turned toward him, her face unreadable. "That's not possible." The doctor flinched. "I thought the same. But the readings are clear. The child is growing, strong, unstable but alive." She stood now, towering over him. "The father?" The doctor hesitated. "Human." Jaxon Reid. The sound of her scream shook the palace. Vases shattered. Guards rushed forward, then stopped, unsure if they'd be killed for stepping in. Valzari's fist slammed into the wall, her nails cutting through the soft metal. Her breathing turned wild. "He knew," she hissed. "He planned this." She paced the chamber, shaking. "He wanted this. He wanted to shame me, to plant his seed in my bloodline." Suddenly she stopped. Her reflection in the mirror caught her attention. She stared. She didn't look like a leader of the Zalari. She looked afraid. She touched her stomach slowly, fingers trembling. There was something growing inside her. Not just a child. A symbol. A living proof of everything her people hated. And yet, her hands didn't pull away. She met with the High Council that evening. The room was silent as she entered, her robe dragging like a shadow behind her. The elders already knew. "Is it true?" one asked coldly. She didn't answer. Another leaned forward. "You let a human touch the royal blood?" She clenched her jaw. "It was not planned." "But it happened," said the eldest voice. "And the child lives?" "Yes," she said. Through gritted teeth, another elder stood. "Then you will terminate it. At once." Valzari raised her head, and for the first time in her life she disobeyed. "No." Gasps echoed. In the silence that followed, her voice cut like glass. "The child is mine. I will not erase my mistake with another one. And if the council tries to force it, they will regret it." The room remained frozen. They had never seen her like this. Strong. Not just with pride, but with fire. Later that night, she sat alone on the balcony. The stars above Zalari Prime twinkled cold and far, away. She pressed her palm against her belly, still no movement. But she could feel it. A faint thrum, life, hybrid life. She remembered Jackson's words by the canyon. "We don't give up, no matter who laughs at us." She had laughed at him. Now his voice lived inside her. A quiet part of her wanted to scream again. But an even quieter part wondered what kind of child would be born from this impossible bond. A child of pride and survival. A child of 2 enemies. A child of revenge. Or maybe something more. Confrontation at the Dock Earth sky was clear that morning. Birds chirped. Wind flowed gently through the canyons. But Jaxon Reid didn't trust the peace. He stood at the edge of the old space dock, watching the sky, arms crossed. His face was calm, but his gut told him something big was coming. He was right. Without warning, the sky darkened. A massive shadow fell over the dock. The Zalari war cruiser pierced the clouds like a sword. Sleek, silent, angry. Jaxon didn't flinch. A second later, a transport shuttle screamed toward the ground, fire jets flaring. It landed hard, metal groaning. The ramp dropped. Out stepped Valzari. But she was different now. Her eyes were sharper. Her walk more forceful. No guards this time. Just her, alone, burning with fury. Jaxon watched her approach. She didn't say anything. Neither did he. When she stood face to face with him, the air between them was thick, electric. Then she slapped him. Hard. Across the cheek. Jaxon didn't move. "You planned this," she hissed. "You knew. You wanted this." He met her gaze. Calm. Cold. Yes. Her fists clenched. I should crush your species for this insult. Then do it, he said. She blinked. He took a step closer. You called me a breeder in front of the galaxy, so I gave you something to breed. Her breath caught. She looked like she might hit him again. Instead, she whispered, You used me. No, Jaxon said softly. You opened the door. I walked through. Vale turned away, pacing like a caged animal. This child, she said, voice shaking, is already being called an abomination by my people. He stepped toward her, but not by mine. She spun to face him. Do you think this is some kind of victory? Do you think you've won something? He didn't answer right away, then. I didn't want to win. Then why? She shouted. Jackson's eyes softened just a little. Because I wanted you to feel what we felt. Humiliation, shame, confusion, the world watching and judging. Her lips trembled, not with weakness, but with conflict. You succeeded, she whispered. They stood in silence. Then Balzari spoke again, softer this time. I don't know what to do, Jaxon. That's because for the first time you're not in control, he said. Now you know what it means to be human. Her face twitched, but there was no hatred in it, only truth and exhaustion. The shuttle behind her beeped. The war cruiser, above, pulsed with light. They were waiting for her signal, perhaps to leave, perhaps to attack. Jaxon pointed to her stomach. I don't care what your people say. That child has two halves now, and I'll protect mine. Val's eyes widened slightly. You would raise a half-Solari child, even if I left them here? Yes, he said. I'd raise them with pride. Her next words came as a whisper, almost too quiet for him to hear. I don't want to go back. He looked at her, then slowly, held out his hand. Then don't, she stared at it. That same hand, the one that caught her when she slipped, the one that handed her warmth during the storm, the one that changed her future. Her fingers twitched. She didn't take it. Not yet. But she also didn't walk away. The scandal. The scandal didn't just break, it exploded. Across every major galactic channel, from the digital waves of Zenth Prime to the satellite clouds of old Earth, the headline spread like fire. Solari Empress pregnant by human mechanic, first. Hybrid embryo confirmed. Some called it treason, others called it a miracle. A few called it the beginning of war. But no one stayed silent. In the glowing halls of the Solari High Council, elder voices screamed. She has broken the bloodline. She must be stripped of rank, exiled. This is worse than contact, with wild species. Outside the chambers, protesters marched through Solari cities with glowing signs. Purity must be protected. No to crossbloods. Shame on Valzari. But in the underground streams of the younger generation, especially those studying off-world, another message rose. Maybe this is what progress looks like. On Earth, Jaxon sat in a quiet cabin. No guards, no reporters, just a quiet screen, buzzing with alerts. He watched as commentators debated his actions. Some called him a liar, a manipulator. Others hailed him as a hero, a symbol of resistance. He didn't seduce her, said one popular Earthstream host. She chose him. The galaxy is just not ready for what that means. In the Solari Palace, Valzari stood before her reflection. Her belly was still flat, but inside she could feel it. A pulse. A whisper. A future. Her advisors begged her to deny it, to say she was drugged, tricked. You can save your image, they pleaded. She stayed silent. We'll say the child was from a lab accident. Yes, cloning error, a mistake. She raised her hand. Enough. This is not a mistake, she said. This is the next chapter. Soon the Galactic Union called an emergency council. 12 major species sat at a round, glowing table. Holograms of their planets hovered above their heads, and, at the center of it all, Valzari walked in, alone, no guards, no robe, No crown, just her. And behind her, walking with quiet fire in his steps, Jaxon Reid. Gasps spread across the room. Some stood in protest, others stared in silence. One speaker, a frog-like ambassador, croaked, "This is an insult, a human inside." The Union Chamber? Valzari raised her voice. "He is not just human. He is the father of the child I carry, and I stand beside him by choice." Shock, outrage, whispered curses. But she wasn't finished. "You may mock him. You may mock me. But when this child is born, you will not be able to ignore what we are becoming. We are not symbols of shame. We are the beginning of something new." Back on Earth, people watched the broadcast live. Tears, cheers, rage, confusion. Some held up signs of support. Some set fire to old political flags. Some simply stared at the screen, stunned. No one expected her to claim him. No one expected her to protect him. Later, as they stood together in a quiet hallway outside the chamber, Jaxon spoke. "You didn't have to do that." Valzari looked at him. "I did." "Why?" She turned, her silver blue eyes softer now. "Because I am tired of hiding behind fear. And you never feared me. Not once. They didn't touch. Not yet. But their hands stayed close. Almost brushing. The kind of closeness that doesn't need words. Her fury, or her heart." The stars above Zilari Prime looked colder than ever. Valzari sat alone on the balcony of her floating palace. The silver blue lights of her world blinked below her like a sleeping ocean. Far in the distance, transport. Ships moved like insects. They carried supplies, orders, soldiers. Some of them carried whispers. About her. She pressed her hand against her stomach. It had been 3 months. The hybrid child inside her was growing fast. Too fast. Her doctors said it was impossible, but it was happening. 2 bloodlines, 2 worlds, fused into one new life, and the galaxy was not ready for it. Behind her, heavy footsteps echoed. She turned slowly. Jaxon Reid stood at the doorway, tired from travel but steady as ever. "You came," she said. "I never left," he replied. Valzari nodded once. They hadn't spoken in person for weeks, not since the council meeting. Too many voices, too many threats, too many choices. But now, there was only this moment. "Do you regret it?" she asked quietly. He looked into her eyes. "Which part?" She didn't answer. So he walked forward and joined her at the edge. The stars reflected in her eyes like tiny explosions. "I regret letting it become a game," he said softly. "I wanted to teach you a lesson, not change your life." She gave a short laugh. "You did both." There was silence between them, but it wasn't cold. It was full of everything unsaid. He looked down at her stomach. "Do you know what it'll..." "Persona girl," she said. "With your blood, my strength, your fire, my control. And your stubbornness," he added. She smiled faintly. "Definitely." Suddenly, the door behind them opened again, slamming this time. A Zilari general marched in, followed by 2 armored guards. He bowed quickly. "Forgive the intrusion, Empress, but we must talk." She turned slowly. "I am no longer Empress," she said. "To us, you still are." Jaxon stepped slightly in front of her, protective by instinct. The general didn't flinch. "The humans' enemies, the Greyvax Empire, have learned of the child. They believe it's a weapon. They are preparing an invasion." Valzari narrowed her eyes. "What does that have to do with us?" The general looked between her and Jaxon. "They plan to strike Earth first, and then you." Jaxon clenched his jaw. "I need to return home," he said. Vile stepped forward. "You'll be killed." "I'm not leaving Earth defenseless." "You're not a soldier," she snapped. "I'm a father," he answered. That one word silenced. Her Jaxon began walking out. Vile stood still, but her hands were shaking. In her mind, she saw the future. A war, an invasion, a child born into ashes. She made a decision. "Wait," she said. He stopped. Vale turned to her general. "Ready my personal ship, I'm going with him." The general looked stunned. "But your health?" "I'm not weak," she said. Her voice shook the glass. "I will stand beside the father of my child. I will defend his world. And if anyone wishes to stop me, they better be ready to die." 1 week later, low orbit above Earth, the Zalari flagship stood in space like a silent giant. On the bridge, Vale Zari stood in command robes, her belly slightly visible now, guarded by armor adapted for her condition. Next to her, Jaxon wore Earth's old militia gear, scratched and worn but functional. They watched the radar screen as the Greyvac ships approached, huge, dark, hungry for destruction. Jaxon turned to her. "We might not win." She looked at him. "But we will fight." On the surface, Earth's people, for the first time in history, fought with alien allies. Humans with rifles, Zalari pilots in hover armor, Earth mechs powered by alien tech. They fought side by side, not just for survival, but for a child not yet born, a child who would belong to both worlds. In the middle of the final battle, the sky cracked open. The Greyvac's warship, the Devourer of Skies, began descending over the Pacific. Its weapon core glowed red. Earth's defenses were breaking. Vale Zari, from the flagship, made a final call. "Fire everything." The ship's main cannon charged. Then, silence. It jammed. Panic. Jaxon ran to the console. He slammed buttons. Nothing. He opened the panel with his bare hands, tools flying. Sparks burned his arms, but he didn't stop. Vale watched from her seat, heart in her throat. The cannon core hummed again. Jaxon slammed the release valve. A blast of light erupted from the ship. The Greyvac's warship exploded mid-air, falling into the ocean like a broken god. Victory, but not peace. Not yet. 2 weeks later, in a quiet room on Earth, deep underground in a human Zalari facility, Vale Zari gave birth. It was not easy. Hybrid labor had never happened before. Doctors from both worlds worked together, terrified and amazed. Jaxon never left her side. Not for 1 second. When the baby cried, it echoed through the room like music, soft, new, powerful. A girl with pale blue skin and dark human eyes. Vale held her, weak but smiling. "She's beautiful," she whispered. Jaxon nodded. Like her mother. The news spread instantly. The war had ended. The child had been born. Some still called it a scandal. Others began to call it hope. 1 month later, Vale Zari stood at the Galactic Summit again. But this time, not as a target, as a guest of honor, with her daughter in her arms and Jaxon at her side. She walked straight to the center of the hall, the same place she had once mocked him. She raised her voice. "You called humans primitive, you called me proud, you called this child impossible. But here we stand, together. You can fear us, or you can follow us. Because this child will grow up in a galaxy we build, not the one we inherited." Silence. Then one delegate stood, clapped. Another. Then another. Soon the whole summit echoed with the sound of change, not war, not politics, but something new. Back in their quarters, Jaxon looked at Vale as she rocked their child. "Do you think they'll accept her?" he asked. Vale smiled softly. "They'll have no choice." She looked up at him. "And neither will we. We're bound now." He sat beside her. By accident, she shook her head. By consequence. Pause. Then, by heart. Their fingers touched. No longer enemies. No longer symbols. Just two lives that collided and created something no one could have imagined.